Alright, what is going on today, explorers? Today we're doing a video on giants and giant skeletons. Alright, so if you're new here to my channel, this is where I document all my hikes and explorations. So if you like those kind of videos, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and you can follow along with me. Alright, so let's give a little bit of a forestory before I get into this video. Last year I made this video about the Lovelock Caves and some giant skeletons that were found in there supposedly in the turn of the last century. In this video, I talk about how they mention it in the Nevada History Museum. They have this whole plaque made out to this story about these giants that lived in this cave, and it's a commemoration to history as it was told by the Paiute people. There was a race of giant people that the Paiute tribe went to war with, and that was their account. Anyway, so I posted this video and then I don't know what happened. People went crazy and it just got me more interested. People kept putting in the comments like, have you heard about this? You know, there was skeletons found here. These are all places I want to explore someday. So I decided I was going to do some research and I kind of put together a short little compilation, you know, hopefully short, of the most interesting stories of giants and giant skeletons that I could find on the internet. Okay, so first off, let's get started here. I just want to get this out of the way. About 10 years ago or so, and maybe up until now, there have been some obviously faked Photoshop pictures of giant skeleton excavations going on. And I'm sorry to burst your bubble, but if you're one of the people that thought these were real, most of them, and probably all of them, are not. Some of these are really bad. These came out when Photoshop was just kind of like blossoming and people didn't really, hadn't seen pictures faked this well. But now if you compare them to Photoshop now, 10 years later, they're obviously faked. And you can tell just by the lighting is not right. The contrast between, when his hand is hovering over it, you can just see how the sharp edges aren't right. The guy standing over this skeleton here, it just doesn't look right. The skeleton's like laying in like a two-dimensional form and like he's standing on a 3D ground. It just looks weird. And also, we're mostly going to talk about giants less than 20 feet tall. If this person next to this giant skull was real, this person would be like 30-something feet tall. That's just ridiculous. I think that this was almost put out as misinformation. How can we find the truth if people are going to put out obvious lies? Moving on from that then. So real quick, I'm not going to get too much into this because there's our giants talked about in the Bible. I think most of us know those stories about the Nephilim and David and Goliath and whatnot. There's also tons of stories of giants in other creation stories, including the Paiute tribe and tribes all over the world that still believe in these tales. And I think that these are important factors, like these are important indicators that these things could have existed. I just think that they're just not strong enough to hold up scientifically on their own. Like here you're gonna see just some weird drawings of some large warriors and some small warriors, people standing next to giraffes. And does this mean anything? Not really. I just think that they're interesting. They're interesting indicators that perhaps that these stories are true. The only evidence that's really going to blow this thing out of the water is actual skeletons that are actually that tall. Okay, so that's why the first, and to me the most interesting story, is the Lovelock Cave Giants. Now, again, I'm not going to go too deep into it because I already did a 15-minute video on it, but you can watch that. But basically, we have everything. We have a historical recollection from the Paiute tribe. We have the newspaper account of the giant skeletons being found, and then the skulls being larger than average, femur bones being larger than average. And then we actually still have some of the skulls. In this video here, this explorer goes into the Nevada History Museum where it's said that these larger than average skulls are found. Now, is that an indicator of giants? Well, that's definitely an indicator of giant people. I mean, just a few hundred years ago, the average height of a human was only 5'6". So if you're 7 feet tall, there are a lot of people that are up to, 6'7", 7 feet tall today, those would be giant people to them. But anyway, so that's number one. I think the Lovelock Giants is the most interesting. All right, so second interesting story about giants is the Giants of Kandahar. Now in this story, a couple special forces go on to this blogger's channel, L.A. Marzulli. He talks about all this kind of stuff from, you know, giants to ancient aliens to the Bible and like all this stuff. So he goes and he interviews these two guys. One guy that, you know, heard about this story about the giants, and another guy who says he was actually there and that his friend was killed by this giant. And they basically shot him in the face. The giant was taken somewhere, and they were made to sign a silence agreement that it never happened. So anyways, is this story true? Until he comes forth and wants to really defend the person that was killed there that day, then I don't think I can ever move out of more than 50%, because I'm going against one guy's word who said he lost a friend there to the government's word that said that the person said was lost was actually killed in an explosion accident. So they both agree that this person is dead. But one person who says he was with him said he was killed by a giant. The government says that he was killed by an explosion. I just have some questions. Why would this guy say that about his friend? If I had a friend that was killed in Iraq, I want people to know exactly how he died. I wouldn't make up a fairy tale story about it to have him live on like that. Unless possibly Dan, this person who died, unless this person who was killed that day, I think Dan was his name, unless that was his dying wish. I want you to tell the world I was killed by the Kandahar giant. Maybe it is. And so he decided to come out, was like, well, I'm not going to go public with it. I'm going to blur my face and I'm going to tell everybody that he was killed by this giant and start this rumor. Also a possibility. So, you know, it could be a fabrication. He might have a motive behind it to, you know, carry out his dead friend's wish. So number two, the Kandahar Giants. Look that up. Really interesting story. L.A. Marzulli. Okay, so this one, the Wisconsin one, it kind of had a lot of newspaper clippings on it. And this is about the Phillips brothers excavated Indian mound. Originally, these mounds were thought to be some predated race of Indians that built them, but then, you know, this article talks about how they determined that they were made from these late woodland Indians between 500 and 1150 AD. So these guys went and excavated these mounds, and it says that they found a young child, a number of small snail shells, possibly part of a necklace. They found 14 skeletons. Upon examination, proved without a doubt to be remains of powerful prehistoric race. Powerful, I don't really know what that means. Oh, it says here, a powerful frame and immense in size when compared with people of this day. And this says in Maple Creek, Washington, one of the 3 recently discovered mounds this town has been opened, is found the skeleton of a man of gigantic size. The bones measured from head to foot over 9 feet and were in fair state of preservation. The skull was as large as half a bushel measure. Some finely tempered rods of copper and other relics were lying near the bones. The mound from which these relics were taken is 10 feet high and 30 feet long and varies from 6 feet 8 inches in width. 2 mounds of lesser size will be excavated soon. Finders of it. So this is pretty well documented, these mound builders out in Wisconsin. But my question is, you know, where are the bones? And really, when you really start doing all the research on the internet about this stuff, you really start finding there were tons of articles from all over the country and all over the world about giant skeletons being dug up. But if you want me to do more research on these individually, I'd be more than happy to do another video and start researching each one of these cases individually if that's something that people like and they like this video. Also, to be added onto this, I'm just going to add that they found a large skull in Texas, which they actually got pictures of, and I'll put them up here. And again, this is just a slightly larger than human skull, but still interesting evidence. That's more kind of the evidence that I want to see is the giant skulls and the actual bones, because that's real evidence. Okay, so this is an interesting article. I've never heard anything about this one. It basically just says in Winnemucca, Nevada, which is a lot further northeast than Lovelock, maybe an hour and a half or so, I believe. So it says workmen engaged in digging gravel here uncovered a depth of about 12 feet, a lot of bones that were part of a skeleton of a gigantic human being. They just come right out and say it. Joseph Rogan, who was in charge of the work, examined the bones and once decided that they were those of a man or a woman. They were taken to Dr. Samuels, who examined them thoroughly and pronounced them to be bones of a man who must have been nearly 11 feet in height. The metacarpal bones measure 4.5 inches in length and are in large proportion. A part of the ulna was found in which complete form would have been between 17 and 18 inches in length. The remaining part of the skeleton is being searched for. And it says it may be related to the Cardiff giant. And then when I look up Cardiff giant, it says one of the most famous hoaxes in American history. So now this is something that tells me that there was actively people trying to create hoaxes around these giants. That's one of the things that makes me skeptical about any of this being real. Because again, we can't produce any giants, and some of the giants that they have produced are fake. Again, the best we have to go off of is these larger than normal skulls. The story was that they uncovered this 10-foot tall giant, a petrified man. And look at these pictures. It doesn't even look, it looks way too detailed. Look, looks way too detailed. Way too detailed. So you got these picture here of them pulling it out of the ground and all these people. So this is a pretty elaborate hoax. I mean, they were trying to fool everybody. It wasn't just like, you know, we created this, let's tell them we found it. They actually pulled it out of the ground, had everyone come around, take a picture with it, and honestly, when you look at it here, it doesn't even look realistic. I mean, it has way too much detail. His freaking thing is still there. Wouldn't it be withered away? So it says the giant was a creation of a New York tobacconist named George Hull. Hull, an atheist, decided to create a giant after an argument at a Methodist revival meeting about Genesis 6:4, which states that there were giants who once lived the earth. The idea of a petrified man did not originate with Hull, however. During 1858, the newspaper Alta, this is a long time before they found that other giant. Hull hired many men to quarry out a 10-foot, 4.5-inch long block museum in the Fort Dodge, Iowa, telling them it was intended for a monument to Abraham Lincoln. Oh, that kind of looks like Abraham Lincoln. Let's see. He shipped the block to Chicago, where he hired Edward Burgart, a German stonecutter, to carve into the likeness of a man, and swore him to secrecy. Various stains and acids were used on the giant to appear to be old and weathered, and the giant's surface was beaten with a steel knitting needles embedded on the board to simulate pores. During November 1868, Hull transported the giant by railroad to the farm of his cousins. Let's see, by then he spent $2,600 for the hoax, nearly equivalent to $48,000 in 2017. Nearly a year later, he hired Gideon Emmons and Henry Nichols ostensibly to dig a well, and on October 16, 1969, they found the giant. One of the men reportedly claimed, "I declare some old Indian has been buried here." So he basically did this to put it on display to make money, and he did it for a long time. So by the time 1869 rolled around, he admitted that they were fakes, and in 1870 both giants were revealed as fakes, so I guess he made another giant. We're just skipping ahead here. Now we have, you know, chalk up one for the debunkers, because now we have evidence of someone admitting to these giants being fake. But this is very elaborate compared to the other ones. The other ones, it was like, hey, we found bones, and then there was no bones. So, you know, it wasn't necessarily the same, in my opinion. But it's also, you know, something to take into account. But alright, you guys, there's still a lot of information out there about giants and giant skeletons, but that's where I'm going to end today's video. I just kind of wanted to go over some of the most interesting and intriguing stories about them. So let me know what you think. Do you believe it? Do you not? What are some of your favorite stories? Let's talk about this down in the comments. If you guys like exploring videos or you want to follow along on my adventures, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, hit that like button, and I'll see you guys out there.